Welcome to the Spiritual Life Management Podcast, where we help you bring balance in your life and live to your fullest potential. With your host, Gretchen Smith. Today, we are going to delve into the mystery of the Great Pyramids, the ancient Egyptian mystery schools, the Emerald Tablets, ancient Egyptian cosmology and divination, with my special guest, Lara Maysa Ingram. Lara is a British Egyptian nude and empowerment photographer and filmmaker who has shot the likes of BBC, Vice, and London Fashion Week. And now, living her best life in Bali, Lara uses photography and art as a tool for self-love and transformation. When the camera is not in her hand, she can be found guiding people through the sacred sites of ancient Egypt, where she runs retreats for those who feel Egypt's call and teachings. Welcome, Lara.
Hi, Gretchen. So good to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming, but I'm so happy we're here together and we've made this wonderful podcast work for us today.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
So I have to say that your background is so fascinating to me. You're probably about half of my age, and you've done so many incredible things in your life. You've been a world traveler from a very young age, a journalist, you're a photographer, and now you're living your best life in Bali. So, would you mind just kind of giving the audience a little bit of a background about how in the world you went from being Egyptian born, you've traveled to all these wonderful places, and now you're in Bali?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, I was born in Egypt, like you said, and half English, half Egyptian. Traveled around from a young age. And then, that was, I guess, mostly because of my dad's job. He was a journalist based in Southeast Asia. So I grew up in Thailand, actually. So I was always very, had this very deep connection to Asia. And Asia just always felt like my second home after Egypt. And then I ended up going to university in the UK, went to film school there, and had a really amazing experience. And definitely London and Brighton, where I was living for university, taught me so much. Yeah, I don't know, I think after a certain point it was just it just wasn't really feeling aligned for me anymore. I felt like it just wasn't a match to who I am as a person, the kinds of things that I value, even just like basic things like sunshine and warmth.
Right.
Yeah, I guess like this is definitely just the highly summarized version, but how I ended up in Bali. So I finished my degree, I finished university, and then I actually went back to Thailand because I was like, okay, I really miss Thailand, I miss Asia, I want to go back. So I ended up doing a TEFL course so I could teach English abroad and just travel around for a year. I ended up actually teaching English at a Buddhist wisdom school in the mountains of Khao Yai for a year. After teaching there for a year, I traveled around, and that was 2014. And towards the end of my trip around Asia, I actually went to Bali, and that was my first time visiting the island. And Bali is a very mystical, magical place. I always say that it's like the island from that show Lost. I don't know if you've seen it before,
Mm-hmm.
but it just has like a magnitude and a power of its own, and it's actually a she, like even the locals consider the energy of Bali to be very feminine. It's a very, very strong magnetic pull, and it's something that I felt, right off the bat the first time I was there. And I remember even having a moment to myself thinking, I'm going to live here one day. And so, fast forward a few years, I went back to the UK. I did a master's. I started working as a filmmaker, did my training at the BBC in journalism and documentary making. And then off the back of that, was freelancing for a few years, doing photography as well. And then at a certain point, I remember, I think this was 2019, I was just feeling really stuck. I guess it's just the classic thing, on paper, everything feels, seems really good, great job, really great friends, nice community, things like going well on paper. But inside, I think I just felt very, very disconnected to, I guess, in a way, my heart and my soul. And I was just caught up in this really, really toxic hustle culture that is incredibly prevalent, I mean, in every industry, but definitely in the filmmaking industry. And I even remember just like these little things that I look back on that I just now find were, in a way quite unhealthy, in the sense that they were really enabling this really toxic culture of just like hustling nonstop and then eventually inevitably burning out, and it's just these little things of like you'd be working, in like the company building, and you'd be running into people and like just having little, office small talk, and people would be like, "Oh, how are you?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm good, but I'm just like really, really busy. I'm just like so busy." And then the immediate response is like, "Oh, well, that's good. Busy's good." But we never really stop and ask, why do we associate that with something that's good? And in
Right.
reality, it's like, you're so busy, but like actually, I was honest to God, at certain points, I was working so much, overworking, hustling, juggling so many different things at once that I was actually making myself sick. Like I was actually
Hmm.
exhausted and I was getting ill. My immune system was just completely shot because I was barely, getting enough sleep, and, wasn't really taking the time to really tend to my needs, on a physical level in some sense, but also on on a spiritual sense too. And my soul was just starving, because I had that
Yeah.
initial connection. I taught for a year at this Buddhist school. I had, I definitely have had my awakenings, but it was just something that I totally lost for a while there when I was in, so caught up in this city life, I guess. The just the go go go, work work work, the overly masculine go getting energy, which is beautiful and needed, but
What most of the world does, right?
exactly, exactly. And and it's a constant struggle. It's like even this concept of staying relevant. I remember even at when I was freelancing. And everyone, you're always pitching, you're always networking, you're always trying to see, okay, what opportunities are coming up. Maybe I can work on this film, or maybe we can pitch this idea or have something commissioned. And then there'd come a time of like, okay, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to go for just a typical break, just any kind of holiday. And you'd say this to people in the industry, and then they'd be like, oh, okay, but enjoy your holiday, but don't be gone too long because otherwise people are going to forget about you. And that was like a thing. I don't know if it's the same in your
Yep.
industry, Gretchen, but definitely in the film industry, and especially as a freelancer, it was like this threat, this like this
Yeah.
like underlying, seed of fear that is implanted into your brain as a trainee. Especially, I remember hearing it again and again, and it's like this conditioning of like we always have to be on all the time. And so anyway,
Right.
I had enough of that. I was like, okay, I just need a change because I just feel so disconnected to myself. And I found a retreat happening in Bali. This is in 2019, and it was a healing retreat with a coach that I had been following on Instagram for a while, a couple of years, and I just really, really resonated with her and her teachings and her way of being. And so, very, very, very spontaneously and very last minute, I was actually the last spot that was available on her retreat. I took it, and yeah, literally within 24 hours after the call with her, I bought my flight to Bali, went to the retreat, had one of the most incredible, profound, transformational experiences there. And I was just so enamored and enraptured by the magic of Bali. It felt so good to be back. It was like, this is just everything that I desire from a lifestyle point of view. And my soul just felt so happy there. And so when I left the retreat, I just thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to move there. Like I need to make this happen. I felt this little whisper in 2014. Now it's time to take action. So I started planning another trip back out to Bali for that summer. And I thought, okay, I had a project that was coming up in London. So I thought I'll finish this project. And then after it's done, I'll fly to Bali in the summer. And then, as it turned out, divine timing, as always, divine orchestration, my project actually got postponed. And so I decided, okay, I spoke to my boss at the time, and I said, hey, I know the project is getting postponed. I was actually planning to go to Bali in the summer, but since it's being postponed, is it okay? Can you be, kind of flexible with me here if I go now? and then I'll just come back to London once the project starts again. And if there's a little bit of overlap and I work remotely for a week or two, is that okay with you? And my boss at the time, and he's just the most incredible human. He's like, honest to God, one of my guardian angels, and he doesn't really know it yet, but he just has always been this incredible influence in my life. And he's like, yeah, no problem. We'll make it work. Bali sounds great. Like, go for it, just really being my cheerleader. So off I went.
Uh-huh.
And then a week later, after I landed in Bali, COVID happened. And I've
Mm.
basically been here ever since.
Oh my goodness. So when you left, were you planning on were you prepared to stay there for as long as you have? Did you have all your
No.
belongings with you?
No,
Oh
I
my
I thought
gosh.
I thought I was gonna I was just going for a holiday, I was like, okay, look, I'm gonna spend a bit more time there,
Right?
see if I can make it work. But I essentially packed a bag for I think I was gonna spend maximum 2 months. And then, when COVID broke out and it was officially declared a pandemic, my flights were canceled. And I booked flights again and
Oh
then they
wow.
got canceled. So I had one suitcase. Yeah, and now it's been 2.5 years that I've been living here.
And it's your home, and it sounds so amazing. It's always been on my to-do list, on my bucket list. I have never been to
You've
Bali.
gotta come. You will love it. It's a really, really magical place, especially for people in your industry. Just anyone that's interested in self-development and spirituality, it's incredible.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Oh, it sounds delightful. So you found yourself now your home is Bali, which we agree is
Yes.
amazing. And you're kind of going back to your roots a little bit now. You
Yeah.
have found these just I guess a wonderful way to get back to Egypt.
Yes.
Would you
Yeah.
touch a little bit on your tours that you do?
Essentially, obviously, as we've mentioned, my background is in filmmaking and photography. But of course, I've always had this, this spiritual side of me. But I always kept the two very, very separate. And I always, I guess, just kept my practice as my practice. I would never have imagined that I would ever be doing what I'm about to do this September.
Mhm.
But I think for a lot of people too, just everything with the pandemic and this kind of forced isolation and forced time alone, and I guess like a reset in a really profound way, it actually caused me to go even deeper into my own practice and into my own studies. And I think now where there's this beautiful interweaving of, my background as a documentary filmmaker, and in the same way, this continued to feed into my own personal fascination with ancient Egypt. And obviously, I'm from there. I was born in Cairo. I go back to Egypt at least once a year, with the exception of COVID because of restrictions. But other than that, I'm there every year. So I've always had this thing on the side, but never, never, never imagined that I would ever make this into a thing beyond just myself, right? So I
Right.
guess how it all unfolded was I was still in Bali, but at this point it was like, I hadn't been home in 2 years in Egypt, hadn't seen family. A lot of people can relate to this. And essentially, I started experiencing, I guess, a new form of, I guess, a new level of intensity, let's say, a new level of intensity in the form of lucid dreams and visions and intuitions coming through in a way that was incredibly surprising to me because I never really associated myself with that. I don't really work in the healing arts. As I mentioned, I'm working primarily as a creative and a photographer, and I do hold space in my own right, with the self
Mhm.
love and the empowerment shoots, but I never identified in that sense. And essentially what was happening was I was getting very, very strong messages to come home, to go back to Egypt. And so I followed it. I went back, and then I decided to take myself on essentially a quest to all of the ancient sites, all of the sacred sites, all of the pyramids, all of the temples. Many of them I had seen before, but just not at the level of consciousness that I would have had, that I had then. And this was last year. This was right before the beginning of this year. I went back, ended up staying for 4 months, just went and dove so, so deep. by the end of my trip, I got another strong message, and it basically was like, you need to take people on the journey that you've taken yourself on. And so essentially, that's where all of this came from. And I'm now about to lead my first retreat. It's called the Alchemy of Egypt retreat. And I'll be taking a very intimate group through all of the sacred sites of Egypt, through Aswan, Luxor, pyramids in Cairo, on an 11-day journey, which is also a huge initiation for me stepping into this role. So, yeah, it's actually my first retreat that I'll be doing this September.
That's so exciting. First of all, I want to commend you for really listening to the universe and taking this plunge
Mm,
into doing something new and different in your calling. So
mm,
that's really, really amazing.
thank you.
And I love the name, The Alchemy of Egypt, you said?
Yes.
Yes. So, can we dive into that just a little bit deeper? What type of things will I'm going to call them your guests, be doing on this
Mm.
tour? And how is alchemy kind of built into the tour?
Yeah, alchemy. So why I even named it the Alchemy of Egypt retreat. So the word alchemy itself actually comes from the the original name of Egypt, which isn't Egypt, it's actually Kemet.
Mhm.
Kemet is what Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization as we know it is actually Kemet. It's not Egypt. Egypt is a more modern name given to it. And so Kem or Kemet is where the word alchemy comes from, and it literally translates to black soil. And essentially, what that means is it's the that kind of primordial mud, that darkness, the abyss, the blackness from which everything, all the elements of creation, all the elements of nature, all of the different properties that come into alchemy of the universe was essentially originating from. At the same time, we talk about alchemy on a much more, on a physical level. I guess what most people today would think of when they hear the word alchemy is, a process of transforming and transmuting metals into gold. And that's one part of it.
Yes.
But I think the other piece, which the ancient Egyptians were definitely incredibly concerned with as well, was the alchemy of our spirit. And it's like all the work that even we do today in, modern self-development, it's all roads lead back to the same place. It's all about this alchemy of our shadow, alchemy of our, subconscious conditioning or limiting beliefs, alchemizing our pain, alchemizing our trauma, difficulties in our life into something higher, whether that be love, whether that be oneness, whether that be a higher consciousness. And so these different threads of transformation are very much woven into the fabric of the entirety of the ancient Egyptian civilization. I mean, it underpinned everything that they believed in, and the way that they structured their society. And I guess what we're going to be doing on the retreat, so to answer the second part of your question, essentially we're really just going to be diving deep, and it's going to be a pretty intense retreat. I mean, in terms of we're going to a lot of places. There's going to be, quite a bit of domestic travel, and essentially we're just touring all of these sacred sites, all of the ancient temples, all of the pyramids. We're seeing some sites that are also not even open to the public. We're going to be doing 3 nights on a beautiful private Nile dahabeya, which is actually the original boats that the ancient Egyptians also used. So there's no electric motor or anything. It's all just, really being carried by the wind, really connecting with the elements and with the water. Yeah, we're going to be doing things like having Blue Lotus tea ceremonies under the stars on the boat. We're also going to be weaving in a lot of different healing and different ceremonies, different practitioners that are going to be coming and sharing their magic with the group as well. It's a quest that we're all going to together as a group, and every single person has their own connection to Egypt, has their own reason, their own intuition that's calling them there. And I guess, yeah, we're going as a group to really unpack that, and essentially create the set and setting and the space for profound life changing transformation to occur if we so choose it.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Oh, you just touched on the Blue Lotus tea ceremonies. Can you
Yes.
share with the audience, in case they're not familiar with it, what is Blue Lotus? What
Mm.
can one get out of or expect from a Blue Lotus tea ceremony?
Yes. So blue lotus is essentially a type of flower. It grows all over the world. I mean, not all over the world, but it definitely grows in places other than Egypt. But yeah, it was a plant that was highly, highly, highly revered and used in ancient Egyptian culture. And even if you go into any of the ancient Egyptian temples or looking at any of their art, the different papyrus scrolls, you will very, very often see blue lotus. I mean, it's pretty much everywhere in the hieroglyphs as well. And
Hmm.
essentially, most people would take it as a tea, and you can literally just put these beautiful, gorgeous flowers, and they are very blue. And essentially just brewing them as a tea. But then there's also tinctures that can be made from them, oils, and essentially what it is used for. So the ancient Egyptians used it to heal all kinds of different ailments, but they also used it as a kind of celebratory, almost like it's not a psychedelic, but it kind of gives you a little bit of a euphoric feeling as well. And they would actually mix it with wine, with red wine, and they would sort of trigger some of these the more like euphoric effects, and they would actually drink it as part of their celebrations and feasts. One other thing that it can be really, really helpful in is assisting people with dream recall. And it can be an incredibly powerful ally if you are doing work in the dream space, if you are, wanting to explore lucid dreaming or astral projections. Blue Lotus is something that is also very often recommended for that as well.
That's fascinating.
Mm.
And it seems that the Egyptians were, well, okay, let's get real. They were very, very advanced in so
Yes.
many things. Their healing, their medicine, they
Mm.
were very, very advanced in that area. The building of the pyramids is another great mystery and really just shows their advancement
Hmm.
and continues to just strike so many questions in so many people as to how that was done. Do you have any of your own theories or learnings as far as the advancement of this civilization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think an important thing to touch on here. So, I guess one thing that it might be good for listeners to just have as a bit of context. So, typically there's two narratives when it comes to the pyramids as the way that I perceive it. So, the first one is the dominant mainstream narrative, which essentially all pretty much all Egyptology, all mainstream Egyptology, and just anything that is just mainstream in education, in the textbooks and history books, whatever we would have been taught in school. It essentially says that the pyramids were built by slaves, essentially to feed the egos of these pharaohs who just wanted these epic, crazy pyramids for tombs, and they believe that the pyramids were built around 4,000 years ago, so around 2,500 BC. Essentially, what I've come to realize in my own learnings and my own just reading, and there's so many incredible, incredible books out there that I can recommend for people that want to get a different perspective. But essentially, the other theory goes is these structures are far, far, far older than we've been led to believe. And so, one of the main theories of that camp is that they were actually built around 10,000 years ago, if not more, rather than 4,000 years ago. So, around 12,500 BC, not 2,500 BC. And then the other interesting thing about the pyramids is that mainstream Egyptology will say this is, these were all to feed the egos of these pharaohs and they were burial chambers, and that's that. But one striking piece of evidence is that no bodies or tombs were ever found in any of the pyramids, unlike any of the other temples where you will see that there are, the different sarcophagi, and clear evidence, okay, that this was definitely a burial chamber. There's markings and hieroglyphs which shows the name of the pharaoh that was buried, and there'll often be paintings, beautiful paintings and illustrations that depict some of their greatest conquests and their in their rulership. But the pyramids, you go inside and they're completely empty. There's no hieroglyphs in the Great Pyramids of Giza. There's nothing on the walls, and it's kind of crazy. I don't know if you've seen any like videos or anything of what they look like inside, but it's like you definitely get a sense when you're going in there that it feels like you're almost in an oven. Like it's
Hmm.
like there
Yeah.
it's like you wouldn't want to be in them when they were turned on.
Right, right. And I personally have not been there. I have this really cool treadmill that does like virtual tours.
Oh, that's so
So I've
cool.
actually had yeah, I've had access to go on numerous tours of Egypt and
Oh
through
my
different
god, that's
pyramids and whatnot.
amazing.
Yeah, so I've never been there, but I have been taken in through this virtual treadmill tour, if you will, to, like I said, many of the sacred sites. And one thing that was really shocking to me is that some of them, they were built with walls, if you will, or the tunnels. They're very narrow. I think it's like 3 feet or four
Mm,
feet.
super narrow.
And yeah, yeah, that's striking.
It's interesting. I mean, there's so much that we could go into on just the pyramids alone, There's just entire books written just about this topic, obviously. Going back to the other non-conventional theories as to why they were built. So not for these, pharaohs to just feed their egos and have these really crazy, outlandish tombs just for them. But many people from the other camp actually believe that they were created as power generators.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
going back to the how advanced this civilization was, and the technologies that they were actually capable of creating and producing, the science behind the pyramids and how that actually works on a physical level is quite incredible.
It certainly is. It's just absolutely incredible. I mean, the precision of the stones
Mm,
alone,
yeah.
that's incredible. How quickly they built the pyramids. Let's see, they align with stars,
Mm.
just to name a few of the, very advanced, unusual things about the pyramids. And I believe they're built on a ley line. Is that correct?
Yes. So the pyramids are actually built on the crossing of two different ley lines. And it's actually these crossing points is where you'll often find big, megalithic structures or very ancient sacred temples around the world. So even if you look at the pyramids in Mexico and also Stonehenge in England, those are also built on the crossover of two ley lines. And essentially, why that is because at these crossing points, it's actually where one ley line that has a very, very strong electromagnetic charge is crossing over one that has a weaker charge. And then in the crossover, it's essentially transferring some of its energy over to the other line. So it's actually fulfilling a very, very important purpose in terms of, dispersing energy across the Earth's grid. And the choice to build these sacred sites on these particular places is absolutely not by any coincidence.
Yes.
Even in the other thing about the choice of where the pyramids were built, there's actually aquifers, like sandstone aquifers, which is essentially like these little kind of like just little like roots of just water. So it's like it's almost like, you know, if you think about our veins and capillaries in our body, it's kind of like that, but under the earth, and all of these little like veins are just like filled with water. And essentially what that means is that it gives it another layer for it to be able to produce electricity and charge and power. So, you know, even if you shine, you know, even if the sun shines on moving water, that creates energy, that creates a certain charge. And so the way that the pyramids were built were, you know, essentially they took all of these different factors into consideration. Even the stones that they used, the type of limestone that they used has a very high constitution of mercury inside the stone. And then the casing, so if you look at images of the pyramids, you can't really see them on two of them, but on the middle pyramid you'll see that you'll see the main stone, you know, the main like giant, you know, megalithic stones that make up the pyramid. But then you'll also see at the very top of it, it's like this casing that has kind of been eroded off now, but you'll still see it at the very top of
Yes.
the middle pyramid. And yeah, you know what I mean by that. And essentially, again, that was to built very specifically to encase the energy and to encase the charge. It's like, you know, how wires have you know, like a casing over them. It's the exact same thing. It's to not let the energy that was being cultivated by the pyramids, the technology in the pyramid, from, you know, leaking out everywhere.
Right. Yeah, that was something that I was fortunate enough to see and learn about on my, if you will, virtual tour.
Mm.
And I thought that was quite amazing and quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you can't even fit a razor blade between any of the stones. It's like it was that precise. And these stones are not small, you know, like they're I think the average weight of one of the stones of the pyramid is about 200 tons.
That sounds about right.
So it's like basically the weight of a, you know, a big car, you know, like a decent sized car. And they had to bring those in from miles and miles away. These weren't kind of local to the area where they built the pyramids. They had to bring them all, you know, on I mean, the theory, the mainstream Egyptologists say, yeah, slaves just like pulled them up with ropes on these ramps for miles and miles long. But I mean, it just, like, you couldn't even do that today. You know, imagine trying to
Right.
pull a car, like a 4x4 car, through the desert on ramps that were miles and miles long, and then have to build them to that level of precision. Again, as you mentioned, you know, aligning perfectly to the constellation of Orion.
Hmm.
And even the corners, each of the corners of the pyramids, they are exactly aligned to true north. So all of the cardinal directions are aligned with each corner of the pyramid. That It's that level of precision that is just, I mean, you couldn't even do that today. And there's a funny story that I like to share about one of the temples in Luxor called Abu Simbel. And basically, the ancient Egyptians built this temple for one specific pharaoh, King Ramses. And essentially, the way that the temple is built is that you go through this beautiful, I guess, kind of courtyard that goes down for, you know, quite a few meters, and there's all these incredible huge, you know, pillars and all of these stunning hieroglyphs and paintings and just like art all over the walls. And then at the very end, you see there's a little chamber where there's a statue of the pharaoh, of his wife, and then his, I think, his son, and then another pharaoh. So it's sort of like a row of the four of them sitting, you know, on these thrones in the middle of the in this chamber. It's like their altar. And basically, they built that chamber and they built the entire temple around it so that on the day of this king's birthday, this pharaoh's birthday, and only on that day, the sun would illuminate perfectly the chamber that they're all sitting in. just on that day, on his birthday, was when this chamber gets illuminated by the rays of the sun. And
Yeah,
what happened?
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. I mean, the knowledge that they had about the solar system and the universe and the laws of nature and just the physics, it was unreal. And like I said, we don't even have this knowledge really today. And they kind of proved that when in the 80s they wanted to, build a dam in Aswan. So essentially they had to move a whole bunch of ancient temples. And this was a huge, huge, huge project. They had to invest quite a lot of money and a lot of time into literally very, very carefully, piece by piece, moving some of these temples so that they wouldn't get damaged by, the waters that would be coming as a result of this new dam. And so they moved the temple, this Abu Simbel temple. And even with all the technology that they had, okay, this was back in the 80s, early 90s, so it wasn't the technology we have today, but still compared to quote unquote 4,000 years ago, slash in reality, 10,000 plus years ago, they moved that temple and they could not replicate what they had done with the chamber. And so now the light shines through on that chamber the day after his birthday.
Oh, I love the story. It's so sad that they moved it and they
I know.
can't replicate it.
Well, it just shows you
Oh.
though. In a way, it sucks that that happened because it's like God, you really messed it up. But at the same time, it's actually just more proof. It's just more proof that like we're not really giving this civilization the full credit that's due in terms of what they were actually capable of.
Oh, I completely agree with you there. That is for sure. So, we've touched on a few things already that are just absolutely amazing that they were able to do in their
Mm.
time. But not to mention, I believe that it's built on the root chakra. Is that not correct?
So the pyramids of Giza are built on the throat chakra, actually.
The throat chakra.
Mm,
Okay. So they're on a couple ley lines. They're on the throat chakra.
yes.
They're aligned with Orion. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Not to mention the fact that these are some of the most beautiful, awe inspiring pyramids. But we also have pyramids on the other side of the world, which really makes you wonder how
Mm,
that happened, what the connection is.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love to visit, all the pyramids in the world. Honestly, I unfortunately haven't been able to see the ones in Mexico yet. But it does really, make you wonder, as you say. There's certain synchronicities and very very similar design and similar properties that were built literally opposite ends of the earth with no way of knowing about each other at the time. So yeah,
Yeah.
it really does
Yeah.
inspire a lot of mystery.
Wow. So we've talked about a lot of the interesting facts, if you will, about the pyramids. But a question for me is, do you feel a certain vibration when you're there? How does it feel
Mm.
to literally be there? Is there a vortex or a grounding, or what happens in your body when you're there?
I love this question. So in the pyramids specifically, and I'm going to talk about the pyramids of Giza since we're on it already. But for me personally, I feel it even just looking at them from a distance because of the way that
Mm.
they just command your presence. It's honestly like nothing that I've ever experienced or seen. And when you go inside, and this is something that I actually experienced personally, and this was before I knew that it was even the throat chakra of the earth. But I remember going inside and I had this very very strange feeling overcome me, which was I just wanted to sing. And
Oh.
I'm not a singer, I mean, sure, I like singing in the shower, but it's not my main jam. I remember very, very vividly. It was like it was so strange. It just these sounds just wanted to come out. And then I started looking into it, and then it turns out this is actually a very, very common experience. A lot of people have talked about this, and of course, yeah, now we understand that it's no surprise that it is on, sits on the throat chakra of the earth. And I would definitely say that, again, if we believe in the theory that it was a generator for power, electrical power, you can feel the charge, you can feel the, viscerally in your body, you can feel that there's a vibration. And I would say that it's a very intense energy. There's temples that I've been to in Egypt that are powerful, but a lot softer. The energy is a lot softer. It's more angelic, it's more light. I would say specifically for the pyramids, it's a very, very intense, potent, I would say masculine energy as well. But at the same time, it's everyone has their own lens and everyone has their own level of sensitivity. So I would say if you're someone that has some type of a practice, if you're someone who, meditates and things like that, yeah, I would literally bet money that you would for sure feel something in your body going inside, because, my belief personally is that they were built to generate power. And so, you can feel the charge there.
Just one more reason to sign up for your retreat. So you're already
Yeah.
full for this year. And are you full for next year? Are you taking a wait list?
Yes. So we are taking a wait list. Yeah, that's definitely the best way to find out more about it. The way that I did it with this retreat, and the way that I will do it for all the retreats, I think, is I took calls with everyone that was interested, because it is a very intimate group, and it's, yeah, I guess I would say like quite highly curated, in the sense that, the journey that we go on is something that's going to be very likely to be profound and life changing. Again, it's up to you what you do with the experience, with, like everything. But ultimately, I think that the people that are ready for this type of experience tend to be a full fuck yes. And with that comes, the commitment and the devotion to really doing the inner work and the preparation, and really, coming to this experience with an open mind and an open heart. And yeah, and just that curiosity and that commitment to, being the shaman of their own experience, and just being ready for some really, potentially life changing experiences.
So you have an absolutely gorgeous website, which is House of Light, and
Thank
that's
you.
HAUS, House of Light. Is this the best place that people can reach out to you and if they're interested?
Yes, that is currently the best place, because, as I mentioned to you before we got on the podcast, my Instagram was recently deactivated. So for now, www.houseoflight is my website, or just email, which is just hi@houseoflight.com. But all of that is also on the website too.
Wonderful. And of course, I'll have all this information down in the show notes for our listeners if they want to reach out and connect and inquire about your next upcoming trip. And I have to say, once they go to your website, though, your website is just an absolutely beautiful artistic display of some of your photography work that you
Mm,
do as well. You are just amazing at helping women just really embody their empowerment that they have and their femininity.
mm.
I would love for you just to touch a little bit on your photography and what you're doing there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah, so essentially, the work that I do with photography is, I guess I use the camera and photography as a tool to facilitate healing, radical self-acceptance, and self-love. And this really
Hmm.
came off the back of my own experience, and doing a nude shoot for the first time, which was actually, funnily enough, at the retreat that I told you about, that we chatted about, earlier on in the podcast, the retreat that I came to in Bali. And so, we each had to do, well, not had to do, we each were invited to do a nude shoot. It was something that really, really helped me shift a lot in the way that I perceive my own body, the relationship that I had with myself, so many different stories, which we all, have. But mine
Yeah.
was, oh, I'm a photographer, I'm behind the camera, never in front of the camera. So all of these, deep deeply rooted conditionings and fears that we have around being seen, and many people, I think, can relate to that. It's a very
Yeah.
human quality: fear of being seen, fear of being rejected, all of that. And so once I started to realize how powerfully this could actually be alchemized through photography, because it is literally a mirror. The camera is a mirror, and there's nothing, in a sense, more vulnerable than, showing up raw, showing up naked, and then having your photo taken, because it's like that is just the definition of you being seen. And it works on an even deeper level beyond just the physical, but that vulnerability, that willingness to just go there, to meet your edge, to really just to stand, and hold yourself, and really be witnessed in that, no matter if you don't have the bikini body that you were hoping for, or no matter if, oh, I wish I had done this a month later so that I could have gone to the gym more, or like cut down on sugar, or whatever it may be. It's like, no, like in this now moment, whatever your body is looking like, whatever, place that you're in, to be able to stand and show up. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be nude, but of course, like, for sure, it's very, very powerful when you are. That in itself, that
Hmm.
act in itself is healing. And it can really, really shift a lot for people. And I've had, incredible feedback from my clients who, none of them are models. I shoot brands sometimes, but very rarely. Most of my clients are just, people, just men and women, who are drawn to my work and want to be taken on, I guess, a little bit of a creative experience and healing journey. And essentially, I guide my clients through different embodiment tools. And essentially, it's about being seen in your vulnerability and your rawness, but it's also opening a space for creativity and creative expression and play, and actually tapping into, okay, what version of you wants to come out, and how can we actually curate a photo shoot that is going to, again, create set and setting that's going to be, I guess, an enabler for you to step into that next version or that higher version. So there's so many different ways that I like to play with that in my different shoots. And but ultimately they are all designed to empower and to leave you feeling empowered. And then the best part is that because it's photography, you have this experience, you have the healing, you feel the shift, but then you also get the physical proof, the evidence. The brain loves evidence, where you can actually, from years and years and years later, imagine showing your kids or your grandkids, oh my gosh, this was this, photo shoot that I did that was really, really incredibly empowering. And this was me in that chapter of my life. And how sacred that moment is, and that version of you is so, so, so sacred, and something that you can always cherish.
Right. That's incredible. I really love the unique way that you've tied your work in photography into this real, authentic, almost spiritual awakening
Mm,
opportunity. And
hmm.
that's just really just unique and something different that I haven't heard a lot of people doing. And what an experience.
Thank you.
So, you're so welcome. So, I've got to ask, because your retreats that you're doing, if you will, or tours that you're doing in Egypt, will you be doing any photography as well during that time with the people that are on your tour?
So it's funny. I actually will be doing a little bit. I mean, I feel like I thought, oh, this can be a photography thing and this, and we'll take photos in all the temples and all of that. But then I just realized, you know what? It's just going to be a lot for me as like a, leading the retreat and facilitating. For me to also be taking photos.
Hmm.
But of course, I will bring my camera. I mean, I can't not. But I have actually arranged for another photographer and videographer to be there and help us capture some of the moments. And then, yeah, and then absolutely, like, I'll have my camera with me if I want to, capture any of the guests that, want to have photos of themselves in these incredible temples, which are absolutely, some of the most stunning, intricate, detail-oriented backdrops that any photographer would ever dream of. But I think just like intuitively going in as my first retreat, I just thought, okay, I don't want to potentially put too much on my plate. So that's why I did bring in another photographer. But yes, in short, there will be, but I don't know if I will be doing all of the photography.
Right. Which, okay, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wealth of information about Egypt and the pyramids and the beautiful history and your wonderful tour that you have, the Alchemy of Egypt, coming up. It's just been a real joy to have you on the show and connect with you today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity and for just asking such great questions and for having me on the podcast. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed speaking with you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Spiritual Life Management Podcast. If you like the podcast, please show your support by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of new episodes. And if you'd like to contact me, just send me an email at gretchensmithcoaching@gmail.com. Also, follow me on Instagram at Gretchen Smith Coaching for more inspiring content on creating your best life. Lastly, if you're interested in working with me for spiritual holistic life coaching, just send me an email or DM. All information is below in the show notes under Linktree. Sending you love and namaste.